The Biden administration is once again endangering Israel. You've probably heard about this ceasefire deal that's going to go into effect. It's an absolute disaster. It's a 60-day ceasefire. Israel signing this deal with the Americans. The Americans are in turn signing the deal with the Lebanese government. Hezbollah is not really in the deal, but the Iranian leader who controls Hezbollah has already given his blessing to it. So the deal is a ceasefire, a cessation of hostilities for 60 days. Israel pulls its troops out, and any violation by Hezbollah allows Israel full operational freedom in Lebanon to deal with it. This is supposed to be enforced by UNIFIL, that's the UN forces, who have always been an absolute disaster. They've always betrayed Israel, and they've never really kept the peace anywhere. The Lebanese army, which is also kind of inept and has been overrun by Hezbollah for decades now, and American troops. Terrible idea. Terrible idea to put American troops into harm's way. Israel has never really agreed to American troops protecting us. I don't know why we would now. This is an absolute disaster for Israel. Let me explain. Hezbollah has been the biggest threat to Israel's existence for decades. Before this war started, they had over 150,000 missiles pointed at Israel, a massive army, not like Hamas. This isn't some guerrilla warfare terrorist army. This is a very serious army whose sole raison d'etre is the destruction of the state of Israel. Since the beginning of this war, since the beginning of when we went into Lebanon, Israel has been crippling Hezbollah. But Hezbollah is still pretty strong. They still have tens of thousands of missiles. They still have an organizational structure. The Iranian regime is still intact. Israel is making progress, and given a few more weeks, Israel could actually destroy Hezbollah and remove this terrorist threat. And by the way, also get them out of Lebanon, where they're basically a foreign power that has occupied Lebanon and turned the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people into a puppet government and a puppet nation that's controlled by Iran. So it's terrible for the Lebanese people to have Hezbollah there. But Israel's on the verge of destroying Hezbollah. And this is when the Biden administration is stepping in and forcing Israel to accept this deal. Let me explain what I mean by forcing them. Prime Minister Netanyahu told his cabinet yesterday, in justifying this deal, that the only reason he's agreeing to this deal is that if we don't agree to this deal, the U.S. government will allow a resolution to pass in the UN Security Council, forcing Israel into a full ceasefire with far worse terms than this deal. In other words, he's basically saying, you got two bad options. You take mine, or I'm going to let the worst one go through the UN Security Council. And if you think that Israel can just easily ignore the UN Security Council, not so simple. Israel is part of the UN. The only way to remove the binding nature of a UN Security Council resolution is with a resolution to negate it, to rescind it, and that would clearly and surely be vetoed by China and Russia if that were to come to pass. So Israel cannot allow a UN Security Council resolution demanding a full ceasefire to go through, and the Biden administration will allow that to go through. They would not veto such a thing. That's the threat from the Biden administration. So basically, Biden is twisting Netanyahu's arm, forcing him to accept a deal that allows Hezbollah to remain intact before Israel has finished the job. It means that the northern communities in Israel are not going to return to their homes because they don't feel safe. All over Israeli media today, the evacuees who've been living outside of their homes, they are up in arms, refusing to go home if this deal goes through. It means that Hezbollah can, lick its wounds and rearm itself and start rebuilding. It means that Lebanese citizens get to come back towards the border. That means Hezbollah comes right back up to the Israeli border again. And it means American troops are in harm's way. Now, you might have also noticed that in this deal, the French are involved in this. Emmanuel Macron is having a press conference today, also to declare victory over this deal. How did the French get involved? Why are the French involved? Well, this is a really insidious part. You see, if the only Western power that was involved in this deal, that was in the middle of this deal, was the United States, well, we all know that Donald Trump is going to take office on January 20th. And the people he's appointed to his foreign policy team are much more hawkish on Iran. And it would have meant that Israel would not have to worry about the terrible terms of this deal after January 20th. So the French are in there so that the Biden administration, with their leftist globalist buddies in France, can be assured that even after they leave office, there's another power in this deal that will continue to enforce it on Israel and continue to twist Israel's arm. The best we could hope for is that Hezbollah violates the deal quickly and Israel resumes its activities. But it's a terrible lost opportunity if Israel does not destroy Hezbollah completely, which they are on the verge of doing. It's a terrible, terrible deal for Israel. It's a terrible deal for the world, and Joe Biden is forcing Israel into a dangerous situation.